All right, so we're talking about Tobit and we're talking about trust tonight. So I want to open off with a question. Any time in your life when you think things didn't make sense, but later you could see how God was guiding you through it.
Yep.
I hear a yep. Anybody else? Yes, no, maybe.
Yes, but Mark just told me to mute because the cat is meowing.
All right.
Yeah, I
So,
can think of one too. Yeah. So
okay. So as you kind of think about those kinds of things, how did that really impact um and shape your trust that you have with God or in God? Or did it not?
I think increases a lot because you see that even though you don't understand the plan, God's in control and
Yeah,
you
so
come out the other side of it.
Okay.
he for me there was episodes of trusting him, and the outcome was so much different than what I thought it would. I I trusted him to get me through it, and he showed me. I don't know how to explain it, but um, it just there's a deer. Um, it was just he showed me that it wasn't as bad as what I thought it was. I guess is the best way to put it. But he guided me through that episode.
Okay. All right. So we're going to look at Tobit, and as we've done the past at least several weeks, Bible Project has a video. So it's a summary of the book for those that haven't read the whole thing. I think it's pretty good. So give me a thumbs up if you hear it.
The Book of Tobit. It tells the story of an Israelite
Thumbs
whose
up.
suffering leads him to a surprise discovery of God's mercy. The book was written around the year 200 BC, centuries after many Israelites returned from Babylonian exile to rebuild their lives. And while we don't know who the author is, it was clearly someone who knew the Hebrew scriptures inside and out. Tobit wasn't considered part of the Hebrew Bible in early Judaism or in the Jesus movement, but the book's Greek translation became popular in later Christian circles, and some of them did consider it scripture. Today, Tobit is part of the Deuterocanon in Roman Catholic and Orthodox Bibles. The book tells the story of Tobit, a faithful Israelite who lived among Israel's northern tribes when they were invaded by Assyria in 722 BC and taken into exile. But remember, the book was written centuries after all of that, when some Jews were still in exile and others were back in the land, all under foreign military occupation. And so Tobit's past story of faithfulness, as he suffered in Assyrian exile, is here offered as an example to Israelites who suffered under later empires. Tobit's story is their story, and it was meant to give hope for the future. Here's how. After Tobit's family is relocated to the Assyrian capital city of Nineveh, Tobit became known for his integrity and generosity to the poor. So he lands a job in the royal court of Assyria. However, it's actually his faithfulness to God that brings him trouble. The king of Assyria, who's an unpredictable grouch, would often execute Israelites for no good reason. So Tobit would secretly take the bodies and give them an honorable burial. But one night, after hearing of an Israelite murdered in the town square, Tobit snuck outside to recover the body, and a bird flying overhead drops a load of poop into his eyes, and he goes blind. So here's Tobit being faithful to his God and his people, and what he gets is blindness. So he cries out in prayer. He would rather die than live blind and miserable, exiled in Nineveh, so he asks God to take his life. Suddenly, the story shifts location to the distant city of Ecbatana in Media, and we meet a distant relative of Tobit's, an exile named Sarah. She too has been faithful to God, and like Tobit, has suffered a great deal. She's been married for one day, 7 separate times. Each husband died on their wedding night from a plague caused by an evil spirit. And so Sarah offers her own prayer of lament. Instead of living in shame and fear, she asks, like Tobit, that God take her life. Through the prayers of Tobit and Sarah, the author expresses the pain of generations of exiled Israelites. But these laments also speak of God's mercy, which prepares us for what happens next. We're told that God responds to these prayers by sending an angelic messenger named Raphael, which means God heals. He will orchestrate a great reversal for Tobit and Sarah. And now this story becomes a dramatic irony. You, the reader, know that things are going to work out, but you have to keep on reading to discover how. Back to old blind Tobit, who's now living in poverty. He wants to provide for his son Tobias, and so he commissions him to go on a long journey to redeem an investment that he made decades ago. Tobit assumes that he's going to die soon, so he gives his son final words of wisdom. And he also asks that Tobias marry within the extended family. So Tobias goes out to find a guide for his journey. And who does he meet? Raphael the angel, of course, who's disguised as a relative, and he offers to help Tobias on his journey. And so, while his mother weeps to see her son go, Tobias sets out with Raphael for the adventurous journey that lay ahead. Their first night at camp, there's danger and surprise. While they're washing off in the Tigris River, a large fish tries to swallow Tobias. Sound like Jonah, right? Just as Tobit's life was ruined by an animal, this fish almost does the same to his son. But Tobias yanks the fish onto dry land, and Raphael instructs him to gut the fish and keep the innards, because this great fish that almost brought death will paradoxically become a source of life for others. From there they journey on, and Raphael informs Tobias that they're nearing Ecbatana, where his relative Sarah lives with her family. Raphael recommends that Tobias propose to marry Sarah, and Tobias is thrilled. So they find her parents, Raguel and Edna. Tobias and Sarah meet, and they immediately fall in love, and he asks for her hand in marriage. Now, this all seems wonderful, but remember, he's husband number 8. Tobias is in serious danger. So the next day they get married, and Raphael tells Tobias to burn some of the fish guts in their wedding tent that night, kind of a weird and smelly way to celebrate, and he tells them to pray to God for deliverance from the evil spirit. Tobias and Sarah do all of this, and Tobias wakes up in the morning alive. Sarah's tragic plight has been reversed. They can start a family together. Now, when Sarah's father Raguel hears about this, he offers prayers of thanks to God. And notice, Sarah's lament poem earlier in the book is now matched by this poem of praise for God's mercy. And if Sarah's plight has been reversed, that means there's hope for Tobit back at home. But for the moment, Sarah's family sponsors a 14-day wedding party to celebrate. And while Tobias parties, he sends Raphael to go and redeem his father's investment, so that when the party's over, they can journey back home. Now, back in Nineveh, Tobias's parents are freaking out about his long absence. The journey should have taken a week, but it's been well over 2. Tobias's weeping mother is certain that her son is dead, but then one day, Tobias arrives. He greets his mother and rushes into town to see his blind father. Raphael instructs Tobias to smear the remaining fish guts on his father's eyes, and Tobit is healed of his blindness. And so in a single day, Tobit's years of suffering are reversed. He regains his sight, his son, and he meets Sarah, his new daughter. After this, the reunited family finds Raphael to repay him, and he reveals his true identity as God's messenger. Raphael urges them to thank God for his mercy, and then he disappears. That's when Tobit breaks out in the longest poem in the story. It's a song of praise that retells the story of his exile and suffering, and of his humility before the merciful God who brought about his restoration. Then suddenly, the time perspective of the poem shifts, and events that are yet future for Tobit, like the downfall of Jerusalem and the Babylonian exile, they're spoken of as if they're in the past. Here, Tobit's voice has merged with the author's later voice, and so Tobit's prayer can now express the hopes of later generations still suffering under foreign oppression. The prayer is that a new Jerusalem be rebuilt by a restored Israel, where God's glory can fill a new temple and all nations be drawn together in God's blessing and peace and kingdom. Essentially, Tobit's praying for the fulfillment of God's promises to Abraham and David that you read about in the biblical prophets. The author and his generation joined Tobit in patiently waiting for this great hope. The book concludes with Tobit on his deathbed, warning Tobias to leave Nineveh because of the biblical prophet Nahum, who warned that the city would be overthrown. So Tobias and his family, they flee to Sarah's parents in Media, and Nahum's words are fulfilled as Babylon topples Assyria. Tobias praises God for fulfilling the first stage of his promises, and then he dies in exile. And that's how the book ends, still waiting for God's mercy to finish what he started. The Book of Tobit is a profound expression of biblical hope in the face of exile and suffering. Notice how most of the book is patterned after earlier biblical stories of faithful Israelites living in a foreign land. The sojourners Abraham and Isaac, who urged their children to marry within the family. Daniel's faithfulness and suffering in Babylonian exile. Jacob's loss and recovery of his beloved son Joseph that leads them to Egypt. And the many prayers in the book are modeled after poems in the book of Psalms and Deuteronomy. Tobit's story was written for all generations of God's people, living abroad in exile or back in the land under foreign oppressors. Tobit maintained hope in God's promise despite his hardship, and he lived for the day that God's kingdom would come here on earth as it is in heaven. And that's what the book of Tobit is all about.
Okay. So, as you kind of listened, what struck you?
Stay away from Sarah.
Unless you
Her
have,
father actually dug a grave in preparation of Tobias dying.
Oh,
yeah, or if you're gonna stay, make sure you have some fish guts.
Really?
this
Who
is
knew,
it's an
right?
interesting book because, like, I don't know, it feels different than other books where you've got these two really discrete storylines that seem to have nothing to do with each other, and then like they come back together in a couple of different ways. You know, it's not just that they, you know, are relatives or whatever, but just like the fish gut thing carries on and ties into even healing Tobit at the end.
Yeah. Other thoughts? No, we're very quiet tonight. All right. So let's kind of think as you do you have any questions as we kind of go forward? Good, no questions. All right. So
Well, I have a question.
good.
This is a real story, right? These are real people. Because there's so many playoffs on the stories from scripture that it makes you wonder, is this a made up story?
Well, what do you think?
I don't know. Because
I thought it was.
That's an example of God's faithfulness.
So the question is it a real story? Is it not a real story?
But they don't know who wrote it. So that's kind of like,
Yeah.
if you don't know who wrote it, then what kind of legitimacy does it have? That's
Well, it still could teach a lesson even if it wasn't true.
yes, that's true.
Yeah, because it had so many playoffs on real scripture. Like
Some had some hyperlinks, maybe?
oh yeah, a lot.
Okay, name some of them.
Well, to marry within your family and
Okay.
the fish,
Fish, yeah.
Jonah,
Jonah.
and there were a couple other, but I didn't write them down.
Exile. So you have Abraham and those
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
So the question is, okay, we don't know who for whom or who wrote it. We kind of for whom was it written?
Everybody. It said all generations, didn't it?
Okay. What's its as you look at what would be its bad I don't know what word to use. It's allure to people.
It's a what to people?
What would be its attraction to people to read it?
Even when it seems hopeless, you don't know how the story's going to end. I mean, I can't imagine this woman who married,
8 times.
like she's
Seven.
like on number 5 and she's going,
Mhm.
someone proposed.
And
He married several times.
did it say she was only married to each guy for one day?
Yes.
No, they
That
died
didn't
on their
break
wedding
through the
night.
wedding
That's
night.
what blows my mind. It's like, what? Come on.
And then still dummies proposed to her. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, take the chance.
Maybe they didn't know.
This is true.
I mean, I would have been afraid to marry the guy.
Well, or the guy should be afraid to
The
marry her.
guy, yeah, but
Her father already dug a grave for the number 8, so
Yeah. She's got bad juju.
yeah, that's what makes you think. It's like,
A bad tongue.
oh my gosh.
All right.
imagine.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some selections from Tobit. I've picked 4, so we'll look at Tobit's faith and righteousness, the prayers that they talk about, Tobit's wisdom to Tobias, and a little bit about Raphael. All right. So let's look at Tobit 1:1-3. This book tells the story of Tobit, son of Tobiel, son of Hananel, son of Aduel, son of Gabael, son of Raphael, of the descendants of Asiel, of the tribe of Naphtali, who in the days of King Shalmaneser of the Assyrians was taken into captivity from Thisbe, which is to the south of Kadesh Naphtali in Upper Galilee, above Asher towards the west, and north of Fogor. I, Tobit, walked in the ways of truth and righteousness all the days of my life. I performed many acts of charity for my kindred and my people who had gone with me in exile to Nineveh, in the land of the Assyrians. Okay, so as we think about that, it kind of goes on. In the days of Shalmaneser, I performed many acts of charity to my kindred, to those of my tribe. I would give my food to the hungry and my clothing to the naked. And if I saw the dead body of any of my people thrown out behind the wall of Nineveh, I would bury it. I also buried any whom King Sennacherib put to death when he came fleeing from Judea in those days of judgment that the King of heaven executed upon him because of his blasphemies. For in his anger he put to death many Israelites, but I would secretly remove the bodies and bury them. So when Sennacherib looked for them, he could not find them. Then one of the Ninevites went and informed the king about me, that I was burying them. So I hid myself. But when I realized that the king knew about me and that I was being searched for to be put to death, I was afraid and ran away. Then all my property was confiscated. Nothing was left to me that was not taken into the royal treasure except my wife, Anna, and my son Tobias. But not 40 days passed before 2 of Sennacherib's sons killed him, and they fled to the mountains of Ararat. And his son Esarhaddon reigned after him. He appointed Achar, son of my brother Hanuel, over all the accounts of his kingdom, and he had authority over the entire administration. Achar interceded for me, and I returned to Nineveh. Now Achar was chief cupbearer, keeper of the signet, and in charge of administration of the accounts under the king Sennacherib of Syria. So Esarhaddon reappointed him. He was my nephew, and so a close relative. All right. So as you kind of listen to that, how what in what ways was Tobit faithful to God despite living in exile?
I
I remember when reading it. It wasn't in this part, but I remember when reading it, like part of it was he talked about how he did not, like some of the other people that were in exile were eating the food of the Gentiles, but he didn't. And he, he's talked a lot about his charity and helping other people, feeding them, clothing them, burying the dead, maintaining, I guess, all the tenets of the faith of God's commandments.
Okay.
So he was keeping the blessing, be a blessing to others, and that's what he was doing.
Okay.
And it sounds like he was following the law as best he could.
As you listen to it and you kind of think about this, echoes of anybody else that we've read about in the Hebrew Bible?
Didn't
Yeah.
Daniel, like,
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
Daniel and
Meshach,
Shadrach,
or
Meshach,
Meshach,
and Abednego.
Shadrach, and
Abednego?
Abednego.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Does it maybe not the exile part, but in some ways, is there a bit of Job here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because everything was
I
taken
was
away.
thinking that, yeah, but
Well,
But
the
it-
fact that he went blind and then
Everything was taken.
everything was taken from him. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, here he is. He's a righteous man and had everything um, taken from him. And
Mhm.
so, as we kind of think about this and we think about, the echoes of the others in the Hebrew Bible that we kind of can connect to this story. Um, what does it say about his priorities?
God's at the top.
Okay.
he never wavered.
Okay. So God's at the top, but as God's at the top, how?
He will do, it's kind of like the sermon yesterday. I mean, compared to his love for God, he hates everything else.
Okay. So so in what ways does he demonstrate his love for God?
Because he's in a foreign country and
Right?
he's setting an example of his faith to the
Okay.
people that are there.
And how is that faith expressed?
No matter what happens to him, he keeps burying the dead.
Okay, yeah, it's so his faith in God is really how he works and expresses that through his devotion to others. He's a righteous man. How do we know that he's a righteous man? Well, he cares for the poor. Okay, he cares for the dead. And so his priority first is Yahweh, but it's lived out through his personal expressions of faith through others. All right, if we go to Tobit 3:1-6, then with much grief and anguish of heart I wept, and with a groaning began to pray. You are righteous, O Lord, and all your deeds are just. All your ways are mercy and truth. You judge the world. And now, O Lord, remember me and look favorably upon me. Do not punish me for my sins and for my unwitting offenses, and those that my ancestors committed before you. They sinned against you and disobeyed your commandments. So you gave us over to plunder, exile, and death, to become the talk, the byword, and an object of reproach among all the nations, among whom you have dispersed us. And now your many judgments are true in exacting penalty from me for my sins. for we have not kept your commandments and have not walked in accordance with the truth before you. So now deal with me as you will. Command my spirit to be taken from me, so that I may be released from the face of the earth and become dust. For it is better for me to die than to live, because I've had to listen to undeserved insults, and great is the sorrow within me. Command, O Lord, that I be released from this distress. Release me to go to the eternal home. And do not, O Lord, turn your face away from me. For it is better for me to die than to see so much distress in my life and to listen to insults. Then if we kind of look at 11 through 17, at the same time, with hands outstretched toward the window, she, that is Sarah, prayed and said, Blessed are you, merciful God. Blessed is your name forever. Let all your works praise you forever. And now, Lord, I turn my face to you and raise my eyes towards you. Command that I be released from the earth and not listen to such reproaches anymore. You know, O Master, that I am innocent of any defilement with a man, and that I have not disgraced my name or the name of my father in the land of my exile. I am my father's only child. He has no other child to be his heir, and he has no close relative or other kindred for whom I should keep myself as wife. Already 7 husbands of mine have died. Why should I still live? But if it is not pleasing to you, O Lord, to take my life, hear me in my disgrace. At that very moment, the prayers of both of them were heard in the glorious presence of God. So Raphael was sent to heal both of them. Tobit by removing the white films from his eyes so that he might see God's light with his eyes. And Sarah, daughter of Raguel, by giving her in marriage to Tobias, son of Tobit, and by setting her free from the wicked demons of Asmodeus. For Tobias was entitled to have her before all others who had desired to marry her. At the same time that Tobit returned from the courtyard into his house, Sarah, daughter of Raguel, came down from her upper room. All right. So we got two people that have endured some pretty intense sufferings, even in the midst of righteousness. And so as we kind of process their prayers, how does it serve maybe as a model for those that are in the midst of suffering?
They're not giving God a laundry list and the solution. They're just praying for God to do with them as he sees fit.
Okay.
They're also, I guess, acknowledging God's mercy and God's presence.
They're not blaming God.
Okay. Chris, you got a face there.
Well, on one hand, though, at least he's praying for God to end his life. So it's like you sort of think, is he depressed? Obviously, he's depressed, I guess. But so on one hand, he's asking God to take him, but then he doesn't really want God to take him. I don't know.
Sarah's asking for God to take her too because she's can't hold on to a husband.
Right. Yeah. So,
But God does eventually, like in Sarah's case, gives her a husband who survives the wedding night, and that's the way it was supposed to be. The other husbands weren't supposed to be her husbands. It was because he was waiting for Tobin, right? Did I get the right name? Tobit and Tobin.
Tobias.
Tobias, thank you.
So as you think about Tobit and you think about Sarah, I mean, in some ways, I think in our, 21st century sensibilities, we may see their suffering a bit different than probably what was reality in the ancient Near East. So if you think about Tobit for a minute, what did blindness really kind of represent for him?
Life.
Okay. In what
I
way?
mean, well, his sight did, I think, and blindness was just sort of like, now that I'm blind, I'm useless.
Well, was it a matter of just being useless? What had happened to him?
He couldn't perform the function for God of like identifying these bodies that he needed to bury. So he couldn't do what he had been doing any longer.
Right. And in some ways, didn't it say that it had made him destitute?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he was kind of down and out. What was he trying to do? Send his son back and get money that had been owed to him somewhere else. And so he's destitute. And so, he's lower than low. Now, what about, go ahead, Chris.
And back then, didn't they think that when things happen like that, it was like a punishment, like, for their sins?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And then we have Sarah. And so, we kind of giggle that, this is kind of ridiculousness that, one, two, three, okay, after fourth or fifth, you might get but we're up to number 8. Um, what does that represent for her?
Well, she can't fulfill her purpose either, because if she is the only daughter of, she's the only person that's going to provide an heir to her father. So it's her responsibility. That's her job, her purpose, and she can't do it.
She
And
would have
what,
been a disgrace, really. She would have been an outcast.
excuse me, and what happens? That she's the only daughter, the only heir. What happens to that family?
It dies off.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
cease to exist. Cease to exist. So, as we think about, them, we think about this prayer. Um, in some ways, they've been totally 100% decimated. Um, and when you're there, you're kind of the lowest of lows. And um, when you're there, it's a little tough to see God, isn't it?
Mhm.
Mhm.
You just want what? You want to be removed from the pain.
Yeah.
And in some ways, being that low, can you really even see kind of any kind of way out or even light at the end of the tunnel? Well,
Mm.
so I mean, it's quite remarkable that, despite, hey, God, life is pretty miserable right now. I'm at my lowest low. Can you take me out of this? But at the same time, however, you're God and I am not. And I want you to be God. Now, as we think about that, we know that, God hears their prayers. And we know that God not only hears, he responds. So he responds by sending Raphael, an angel. But you know, what's the deal with Raphael?
He doesn't look like an angel.
He doesn't look like an angel. I'm thinking of that. What's that old show? I want to say Surprised by an Angel, but I'll.
Touched by an angel.
There you go. Touched
Yeah.
by touched by an
Touched by an angel.
You know, it's the same kind of thing, you know, lots of people, you know, that's the basic storyline. Somebody's, you know, kind of down and out, and there we have somebody that's unrecognized who it's an angel, a messenger, sent by God to, you know, help them kind of move along. And so, you know, what does that, as we think about that, what do you think? What do you think as you're kind of trying to process this a little bit? What do you think?
God uses helpers.
Okay, God uses helpers.
Well, who was it with Sarah and was it some evil
A
spell?
demon. A demon.
Demon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every time they would try to consummate the marriage, or a demon would kick up his heels.
So she was possessed by a demon?
No, the demon would kind of kill the dude.
Oh,
And where was the angel when the demons were coming?
Well, you know. So I mean, you think about it. So if you were Tobit and you were writing this script, what would you say, or what would you do?
I wouldn't marry her.
No,
Probably
Tobit,
not.
he's a blind dude.
Oh. Gosh, these names.
The other one's Tobias.
Tobias.
So if you're Tobit, okay, you know, so you're Tobit, and you know, you're praying to God, and you want to pray to God. What would you typically pray to God?
I don't know that I'd pray for death, but definitely for deliverance of some sort from all these.
You'd pray to be able to see again, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, to
yeah.
be healed.
Yeah,
Be
that's so you pray, you know, in your short-sightedness, you'd say, Lord, you know, heal me, let me see. And so in that short-sightedness, if God would allow him to see, how would the story have progressed?
It wouldn't.
There you
Yeah.
go. It wouldn't. We wouldn't have this Sarah part. We wouldn't have this Tobias part. Wouldn't have all of that kind of other stuff. So it's kind of in the midst of his suffering that God continues to work in God's ways, which is sometimes weird ways, in order to make something happen. So
Why did Tobias go? I can't remember now. Tobias went.
he went to get money.
Sent him.
Oh, to get money. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
go
yeah,
ahead.
because Tobit remembers that he has this money in this other town, so he calls his son because he thinks he's dying, and he tells him to go find somebody to go with him, and he goes out, he meets Raphael, and he brings him back to Tobit. And Tobit because Tobit says, bring him to me because I want to make sure he's a good guy. And he says, okay, yeah, he's a good guy. Because Raphael, I think, says that he's a family member.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's why he thinks he's okay. So then Tobias and Raphael leave on their journey.
I mean, we were talking earlier about whether or not this was true and did it really matter, but the specificity in the very beginning, just like the son of the son of the son of, and where exactly they're located, it just seems so specific that these people are I mean, I would imagine that these people are real. And even though it's like such an incredible story. And it sounds like there's a lot of weird coincidences. God works like that in like completely weird ways. Like I will never, I mean, Chris and I talk about this all the time, right? I'll never forget meeting Joan at that Christmas pageant that time. And like the two of us, Debbie probably doesn't know this story, but I think most everybody else here has heard this. Chris and I were singing in the choir together, and somehow we didn't figure this out. My sister lives next door to Chris's sister in Elverson.
Oh my gosh.
It's just craziest. It was like the craziest God coincidence. And
Yes.
then, but that's how it works. Like, I don't know. And so I don't.
The other side of the coin of what you were just saying, though, about all the details and the son of and the son of and the son of, Game of Thrones was the same way, and that's not real.
True.
So as we think about that, we think real versus not real. Doesn't matter.
No.
No.
Okay. Because again, when we think about those kinds of things, okay, if it were true, if it's not true, does it take away from, because remember, we're talking about theology here. Okay. We're talking about theology. And so when we're talking about theology, we're talking about, pieces of literature that are going to do what?
Reveal the nature of God.
Reveal the nature of God, introduce us, bring us into the presence of God. So, whether it's real, whether it's not real, it can serve the same purpose. Now, I think one of the things, is in the midst of ugliness, you know, we have this compunction to understand why.
Mm.
And the truth of the matter is that most of the time in ugliness, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Mhm.
And we're never ever going to really understand the why.
Mm.
And what we really need to understand is that, in the midst of ugliness, especially ugliness that's happening to us, sometimes we can't see very well.
I have a why for you.
You have a wife for me?
A why, a
A
why.
why. Okay. A why. Good. I was going to say, I have a wife.
So why wasn't this carried forward in the other Bibles if it's so meaningful?
Because it was in a different language, it was written in a different time, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because in that intertestamental period.
So it actually, it is important, as kind of that literature goes. It was important enough that our, Catholic brothers and sisters, our Orthodox brothers and sisters have included it in, their canon, in the Deuterocanon. It's part of their Bible. But, sometimes us Protestants kick in our heels, um, and, decide that we're, take all the marbles and go home and we're not going to play anymore. And so, part of that, okay, these books really weren't part of the original canon, so we're not going to use them anymore. Okay, we're gonna stick our nose up in the air, and we're just going to stick with the Hebrew Bible. And I think and that's why I said I think it's valuable for us to look at these and think about them and read them, because, you know, they inform us about this period. They all had, these books weren't books that were ignored by Jesus or Paul or the early church fathers. They knew about all these books, and they had some influence on them and what they thought. So I think that they're important in that regard as well. So I actually think it's a shame that
They're not included.
well, that they're not included, or that we actually don't take any time and study them.
Hmm. Yeah.
All right, so as we move on, we look at Tobit chapter 4, 5 to 11, 19 to 21. Revere the Lord all your days, my son, and refuse to sin or to transgress his commandments. Live uprightly all the days of your life, and do not walk in the ways of wrongdoing. For those who act in accordance with truth will prosper in all their activities. To all those who practice righteousness, give alms from your possessions, and do not let your eyes begrudge the gift when you make it. Do not turn your face away from anyone who is poor, and the face of God will not be turned away from you. If you have many possessions, make your gift from them in proportion. If few, do not be afraid to give according to the little you have. So you will be laying up a good treasure for yourself against the day of necessity. For almsgiving delivers from death and keeps you from going into the darkness. Indeed, almsgiving for all who practice it is an excellent offering in the presence of the Most High. At all times, bless the Lord your God and ask him that your ways may be made straight and that all your paths and plans may prosper. For none of the nations has understanding, but the Lord himself will give them good counsel. But if he chooses otherwise, he casts down to deepest Hades. So now, my child, remember these commandments and do not let them be erased from your heart. And now, my son, let me explain to you that I've left 10 talents of silver in trust with Gabael, son of Gabrias, at Rages in Media. Do not be afraid, my son, because we have become poor. You have great wealth if you fear God and flee from every sin and do what is good in the sight of the Lord your God. All right. So, as we think about this, what do you think about his counsel? What do you think about Tobit's counsel to his son?
He wants him to be kind and remember those who are poor that don't have what they have, even if they
Okay.
don't have a whole lot, but remember there's some that are worse off than you are.
Okay. Now, if you were Tobias, what would you think?
And I stand up to those expectations.
Okay. Can I stand up to those expectations?
His father was able to, and he's trying to pass them on to his son. And if I was the son, you would wonder, can I do as well as my dad did?
Okay.
Yeah,
It's a
the
challenge.
son might question it because the father's not doing as well now, where before he
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, that's one of the things, I think we need to think about is, we have Tobit who's, talking about, hey, whatever you do, take care of the poor and, all of that kind of stuff, remain faithful. And, in some ways you got Tobias who's kind of receiving that wisdom and saying, well, It doesn't seem to be like too much wisdom here. I mean, look, Pop, look where it's got you.
Yeah, yeah.
But then he did go off and do what his father asked him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
So, I mean, we got to think about that, that sometimes, the values that we emphasize sometimes may not make a whole lot of sense to others in the time.
Mhm.
So if we think about Tobit, we think about his wisdom, why focus on generosity, humility, and prayer?
I was just thinking, yeah, he focuses on all this, and this is even before Jesus enters the picture.
Mhm.
I just think that's incredible that,
But that's God had commanded the Israelites to do that,
yeah, but
and
not,
they failed.
yeah. And you have this one person that excels at it.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Tobit is telling his son to do the right things to people who need it so that it, God will show him, like he is to show mercy and generosity to others in the same way that he expects or hopes that God will show mercy and generosity to him.
Hmm. Yep.
It's like the do unto others.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, you think about it, if you're going to be a good Jewish person, and you think about the Hebrew Bible, what is the biggest way that you do that?
Hospitality.
Yeah, hospitality and generosity. You
Mhm.
you think about all of the rules and the laws. How much of it is about worship?
Mhm.
How much of it is about rules about how um, we live together with one another? So, the very first thing is this idea of generosity.
Mhm.
And, that's kind of born out of a sense of humility. Um, and so it's one of those things that he's trying to pass it on, to his son. So if we think about that idea of, what are some ways that we can try to pass on our faith to those that come after us?
By example.
Okay, by example.
And I was just sort of thinking about the parable of the rich man and Lazarus and how this rich man has ignored Lazarus who sits by the gate for his entire life. And even in that parable in death, the rich man is asking for Lazarus to do something for him rather than for him to do something for Lazarus. A better example is to serve rather than wait to be served.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right, as we go on, we come into our last section here, Tobit 12, 6 to 10. Then Raphael called the two of them privately and said to them, "Bless God and acknowledge him in the presence of all the living for the good things he has done for you. Bless and sing praise to his name. With fitting honor, declare to all people the deeds of God. Do not be slow to acknowledge him. It is good to conceal the secret of a king, but to acknowledge and reveal the works of God, and with fitting honor to acknowledge him. Do good, and evil will not overtake you. Prayer with fasting is good, but better than both is almsgiving with the righteousness. A little with righteousness is better than wealth with wrongdoing. It is better to give alms than to lay up gold. For almsgiving saves from death and purges away every sin. Those who give alms will enjoy a full life, but those who commit sin and do wrong are their own worst enemies. I will now declare the whole truth to you and will conceal nothing from you. Already I've declared it to you when I said, it is good to conceal the secret of a king, but to reveal with due honor the works of God. So now when you and Sarah prayed, it was I who brought and read the record of your prayer before the glory of the Lord. And likewise, whenever you would bury the dead. And that time when you did not hesitate to get up and leave your dinner to go and bury the dead, I was sent to you to test you. And at the same time, God sent me to heal you and Sarah, your daughter-in-law. I am Raphael, one of the 7 angels who stand ready and enter before the glory of the Lord. The 2 of them were shaken. They fell face down, for they were afraid. But he said to them, do not be afraid. Peace be with you. Bless God forevermore. As for me, when I was with you, I was not acting on my own will, but by the will of God. Bless him each and every day. Sing his praises. Although you were watching me, I really did not eat or drink anything, but what you saw was a vision. So now get up from the ground and acknowledge God. See, I am ascending to him who sent me. Write down all these things that have happened to you. And he ascended. Then they stood up and could see him no more. They kept blessing God and singing his praises. And they acknowledged God for these marvelous deeds of his when an angel of God had appeared to them. So, why do you think Raphael waited till the end to reveal his identity and his purpose?
Well, they wouldn't have experienced any growth if they had known that everything was going to work out.
Okay. Okay. So a lot of growth in that journey.
Mhm.
Okay.
Something about the expectation.
Okay.
It's a stupid comparison, but if the teacher gives you an assignment and doesn't say anything about whether or not it counts, and then at the end you find out that it does, like if you knew that going into it, you might choke up or do something differently. I don't know.
Okay. In some ways, is it actually believable? Well, as somebody comes and say, "Hey, yeah, I'm an angel. I've been sent by God." Oh, really?
Right.
You would have to say, where have you been?
Yeah. So in some ways, it's all of those. I mean, it's would it be believed? It's in some ways it's about that journey that you need to kind of go on, and in some ways, take the step at a time to trust. As we think about the story of Tobit, um, what do- what's the big overarching message? If you had, what's the theme message of Tobit? If you think about what we've talked about.
Trust. He put his trust in God.
Okay. So
Let
trust. Okay.
let Jesus take the wheel and quit asking, are we there yet?
Mhm.
Okay.
In the end, God's in control.
Uh-huh. Okay. Good. Even when it looks ugly and messed up, and we're as at our lowest points. So, one other thing I always want to spend a little bit of time with is, it's nice to talk about the books that we're reading. I think they're interesting in and of their own right. But, to Mark's point, You know, why are they important? And as I mentioned, I think that they had influence on Jesus, Paul, in the early church. And so, if we kind of try to look at that a little bit, again, none of these books, all of these intertestamental books, none of them are directly quoted by Jesus, Paul. They are in some of the ancient fathers, but they don't. If they're going to quote, it's usually from the Hebrew Bible. But if we kind of look at these themes that they bring forth, we can see echoes of these stories in some of the things that we hear. As you listen to some of this stuff, did you hear echoes of some of the parables that Jesus taught?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So it's those themes that we can begin to see. And so if we kind of look at this idea of big, necessary focus for Tobit was about almsgiving, about prayer and fasting. And you look at that and influence Jesus. What did Jesus have to say? Um, didn't he have a great big huge extended prayer called the Sermon on the Mount? What did he talk about? All three of those things.
Mhm.
Okay. You look at Paul, Paul talks about, the same things as well. So we could begin to see those big themes. We also, in the early church, if you think about that, the Acts of the Apostles, after Pentecost, they come. What do we see that's kind of lived out? They sell everything and do what?
Everything.
Give it to the poor.
College.
Okay. And so this idea of caring for the poor, is important, not only Jesus, Paul, but also the early church. I mean, you think about the sheep and the goats. Whatever you did to the least of these, you did to me. The Didache in the early Christian writings, spent a lot of time talking about hospitality, care of the dead, and mercy. Um, Angels, we, as Protestants, we don't spend a lot of time talking about angels. Okay. But if we look at the Gospels, we have the appearance of angels. Paul acknowledges angels. Um, and this idea of angels as being God's um, hands and feet at work in the world has some of its beginnings in the book of Tobit. The idea of marriage and sexual purity. Okay. Um, Jesus has something to say about marriage. Paul calls for marriages that are rooted in holiness and mutual devotion. And not for nothing, we don't do it, but if you think about our Catholic brothers and sisters, where does some of their readings for the rite of marriage or the sacrament of marriage come from?
Tobit.
Tobit, Tobit. All right. So we can see those kinds of things. The idea of God's providence, God's hands at work in the world. And even when things don't make sense, even when we're down and out, God is at work. And so we see that as a theme as well. Yep. What happened there? We also have this idea of resurrection and hope. Um, you know, Talks about this idea of, in the end, folks, the righteous are going to prevail and rejoice. And so we see that as well. So again, Jesus doesn't do any quoting. Paul doesn't do any quoting. But if we kind of look at the themes that are brought forth in Tobit, we can see them in the midst of their teaching. And it's just kind of a summary slide. So I want to leave you with this question just to kind of think about and live with this week. What part of Tobit's story most challenges or encourages your faith in God's guidance right now? So in the midst of what you're living, okay, what challenges or what encourage you to think about this idea of God's providence in your life? Okay, so live with that one, this week as you answer it. As far as next week, for those that want to read, we are in Judith. Judith.
Judith, as in the girl's name.
Judith is in the girl's name. Judith.
Jesse,
Yes, ma'am.
so these the Deuterocanon. So
Yep.
Paul would have known about all these writings then.
Yeah, they were around.
He studied all these. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Yep, they were around. They were not pieces of literature that they would not have known about.
Okay.
And some of them used, and it's like anything else. Some groups pulled from some more than others, but yeah, they were out there. It's not like these were not in the mainstream. All right. Well, everybody have a good night. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Good week,
Bye now.
everybody.
Good night.
Take care.
Thanks. Good night.